had been married to Alina for almost 7 years, long enough for our rhythms to fall into something resembling habit. We were comfortable together, stable, and outwardly content. But beneath that surface, small cracks had begun to spread. Our conversations leaned toward the practical. Bills, schedules, errands. The laughter that once came so easily was now something I remembered more than I experienced. I didn't resent her, not truly. Life had simply grown heavy, and somewhere in the weight of routine, the spark between us dimmed. It was during those years that her younger sister, Zara, became a regular presence in our home. She had an easy way about her, the kind of brightness that drew people in without effort. Where Alina often carried herself with quiet reserve, Zara was animated, teasing, and unafraid to speak her mind. At family gatherings, she was the one filling the silence with stories, her voice carrying across the table, her laughter lingering long after the room had quieted. I tried not to notice the differences. I told myself it was natural to admire a sister-in-law, to appreciate her liveliness in the same way one might appreciate a performer on a stage. But admiration, once it takes root, can be difficult to confine. Little by little, my eyes lingered longer than they should have. A smile from her stirred something I thought had gone quiet in me. There was one evening, months before the night everything changed, that remains etched in my memory. We were clearing dishes after dinner, Alina already upstairs preparing for an early morning at work. Zara stayed behind to help. Our hands brushed when we both reached for the same glass, and though it lasted no longer than a heartbeat, the touch startled me. She looked at me, eyes catching mine with a flicker of something unspoken, before she quickly pulled away. We said nothing, but the silence that followed was heavier than words. From then on, I found myself drawn to her in ways I could no longer explain away. A casual remark of hers lingered with me all day. The scent of her perfume, faint but distinct, seemed to follow me even after she left. At times, I caught her watching me with an expression that mirrored my own conflicted awareness. Neither of us crossed a line, yet it felt as if we were already standing on its edge. That summer, Zara stayed with us more often. She was in between apartments, waiting for a lease to begin, and Alina offered her our guest room. It was, on the surface, a practical arrangement. For me, it was a quiet torment. The sound of her laughter drifting from the living room while I worked in the study, the sight of her curled on the sofa with a book, legs tucked beneath her, it all unsettled me in ways I dared not admit. I told myself to be careful, to guard my thoughts. But temptation doesn't always arrive with warning. It seeps into the ordinary moments, turning them into something charged. A conversation about music became an exchange of favorite songs, her playlist overlapping with mine in uncanny ways. A shared drink after dinner stretched late into the night, until Alina, exhausted, excused herself and left us in the soft glow of the kitchen light. That was when I began to feel the shift most acutely. Alone with Zara, the air seemed different, as though we both recognized the fragile balance we were keeping. I laughed too easily at her jokes. She leaned too close when she spoke. It was never overt, never bold enough to name, yet the undercurrent was unmistakable. The night it all changed arrived in the most ordinary of ways. A family gathering ran late, and Alina, drained, went to bed early. Zara stayed behind, lingering with a glass of wine in hand. The house was quiet, shadows stretching long against the walls, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between our words. I remember the way she tilted her head when I asked if she was tired, her smile slow, almost knowing. Something in that silence felt inevitable. And as the clock pushed past midnight, I realized we were no longer simply brother and sister-in-law sharing space under the same roof. We were two people balanced on the edge of a decision neither of us had voiced, but both of us felt. The living room felt different that night, as though the walls themselves carried the weight of what was unspoken between us. Alina had gone upstairs hours earlier, worn from the long day. Her footsteps had faded, her door closed, and suddenly the house belonged to just Zara and me. She sat across from me on the sofa, her glass of wine resting lightly in her hand, her eyes lingering with a softness I had learned to recognize. We began with harmless talk, movies we liked, the city she planned to move into, stories from her job. But each exchange seemed to pull us closer, our laughter too quick, our pauses too long. I watched the curve of her smile as she teased me about my predictable habits, and I felt the pull of something far more dangerous than amusement. The air grew heavier as the minutes stretched on. I noticed how her bare feet curled against the cushion, how her hair fell across her shoulder when she tilted her head. Every detail seemed magnified, heightened by the silence of the sleeping house. "Do you ever feel," Zara said, her voice low, "like you're just drifting through the days?" Her words struck something raw in me. I nodded before I could stop myself. More often than I'd like to admit. That admission opened a door I had long kept sealed. We spoke then of loneliness, of unspoken disappointments, of moments in our lives where we felt unseen. Her eyes shone with an understanding that felt too intimate, too dangerous, yet I couldn't look away. When she shifted closer, it wasn't abrupt. It was slow, deliberate, like the tide moving toward the shore. Her knee brushed against mine, and though I told myself to pull back, I remained still. The contact sent a current through me, sharp and undeniable. "I shouldn't say this," she whispered, her gaze fixed on her glass rather than me, "but sometimes I feel closer to you than anyone else." The room seemed to shrink around us. I heard the words echo in my mind, layered with all the looks, the small touches, the quiet tension we had carried for months. I reached out before I could think, my hand brushing hers. She didn't move away. The silence stretched, fragile and full. Then, as though guided by something beyond either of us, she leaned in. The first kiss was tentative, hesitant, a question neither of us dared to voice. But the moment her lips touched mine, hesitation dissolved. The kiss deepened, urgent and hungry, years of restraint breaking in an instant. My heart pounded as I pulled her closer. Every sense was sharpened. The warmth of her skin, the taste of wine on her breath, the way her fingers curled against my shirt as though afraid I might disappear. In that moment, guilt and desire collided, yet desire surged louder. We moved together, stumbling from the sofa to the guest room as though the walls themselves urged us forward. Each step felt irreversible, every kiss a confirmation that the line we had feared crossing no longer existed. Clothes slipped away, barriers fell, and for the first time in years, I felt consumed, alive, reckless. The night unfolded in waves, passion fierce and unrelenting, tempered by moments of stillness where we simply held each other, breath mingling, eyes locked as though searching for some impossible answer. When at last we lay tangled in the sheets, silence returned. But it was no longer the easy quiet of before. It was charged, heavy with realization. I stared at the ceiling, my chest rising and falling, and felt the rush of what we had done crash against me. Beside me, Zara turned onto her side, her hand resting lightly against mine. Her touch was gentle, yet it carried the weight of everything we had risked. Neither of us spoke. Words would have made it too real. And as I closed my eyes, torn between exhilaration and dread, I knew the night had not ended. It had only begun to unravel the life I thought I knew. The first light of dawn crept through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving. I woke before Zara did, the weight of the night pressing down on me harder than the blanket tangled around our legs. For a moment, I simply lay there, listening to her steady breathing, the warmth of her body beside mine. It felt unreal, like a dream too vivid to last. But as the silence stretched, reality returned with brutal clarity. This wasn't a dream. It had happened. Carefully, I slipped from the bed, each step deliberate to avoid stirring her. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, betraying me in the stillness of the house. I gathered my clothes, pulling them on with fumbling hands, my heart pounding at the thought of Alina just one room away. When I turned, Zara was awake. She watched me quietly, her expression unreadable. For a second, I expected her to speak, to reach out, to make sense of what we had done. Instead, she sat up slowly, drawing the sheet around herself, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me look away. Neither of us knew what to say. Words felt flimsy, useless against the enormity of what had passed between us. At last, she broke the silence, her voice low and cautious. "We can't let this change everything." But even as she said it, I saw the doubt flicker in her gaze. We both knew things already had changed. I left the guest room and made my way to the kitchen. The house felt different, as if it had absorbed the secret we now carried. Every corner seemed to hold a shadow of the night before. I poured coffee I didn't want, the bitterness sharp against the guilt rising in my throat. When Alina appeared, still groggy from sleep, she smiled at me with the easy familiarity of a wife unaware. That smile was a knife. I forced myself to meet her eyes, to nod as she spoke about her restless night, though my chest tightened with every word. If she looked closer, if she searched me for even a second, I feared she would see everything I was trying to bury. Zara entered moments later, her hair tied back hastily, her expression carefully composed. She greeted Alina warmly, masking the tremor in her voice with practiced ease. I watched them embrace, sister to sister, and felt my stomach twist. I wondered if Alina noticed the way Zara avoided my gaze, or the stiffness in her posture. But she didn't. She laughed, grateful for the company, unaware that betrayal had taken root in her own home. The morning unfolded in fragments. Small talk over breakfast, dishes clinking, the hum of ordinary life pressing against the secret burning between Zara and me. Every stolen glance felt like a confession. Every silence stretched too long. I found myself speaking more than usual, filling the air with words I didn't care about, desperate to drown out the thoughts clawing at me. By midday, Zara packed her things to leave for the weekend, her bag slung over her shoulder. She hugged Alina tightly, promising to return soon, her smile painted carefully across her face. When her eyes flicked to mine, just for a moment, the look was heavy with everything we couldn't say. Then she was gone, the sound of the door closing echoing like a final warning. Alina turned to me, unaware of the storm inside my chest. She reached for my hand, squeezing it with affection that should have comforted me. Instead, it left me hollow. I carried the secret like a weight no one else could see. The memory of Zara's touch haunted me, intoxicating and poisonous all at once. I told myself it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness that would never be repeated. Yet deep down I knew the truth. The night had awakened something I could not easily silence. That evening, as the house settled into quiet once again, I lay beside Alina, her breathing steady in sleep. My eyes traced the ceiling, my thoughts restless. Some choices, I realized, do not end with the morning. They linger, shaping every glance, every silence, every future moment. And though the world outside carried on unchanged, I knew my life had shifted in ways I could never undo. The night with Zara was over, but its shadow was only beginning.